Hello, friends. Welcome to WeatherBrains, episode number 606. The pre-show, that marvelous, magical time of the show where we do our best to share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally say very outrageous things. So we have a big weather story on our hands. Obviously, we know what we're going to talk about tonight. I need to go back and listen to last week's show. I don't think we ever wound up doing a weather roundup. We started just blabbing, and it got late, and I had to go television, and I don't think we did a weather roundup because I would love to, if we did, I would love to see who predicted Harvey because that was Monday, and Harvey came in, as a Category 4 hurricane Friday evening. Anybody would have called that. So, hello.
Howdy. Can you hear me?
Hello, man. Where are you?
I'm in a moving car.
He's on the road.
On the passenger side. Uh-huh.
Wow.
There's Bill Reed.
Doing what I can to
Bill,
get on
can you
the
hear?
show.
Yep, can hear you fine.
Awesome. Bill, can you hear us okay? Yeah, we're good. Hey, Nate, do you have any headphones by any chance? We're hearing the talk back coming through.
Yeah, I do not, but I'll try to mute pretty good.
Yeah, I'll just stay muted when other people are talking because I'm hearing my voice come back down your channel. Where are you going, Nate?
Going to the beach. I had been at the beach, had to come back to Raleigh to teach. Now I'm going back to the beach.
I assume this is work-related.
Yes. Well, no, the beach trip is not work-related.
Oh, it's not. I thought you were covering potential tropical cyclone 10 live from the Outer Banks.
No, I'm sure work would like me to, but no, I'm taking a break.
Okay. Well, cool. So Nate's going to be on the this. We got a full house. Kevin, how you doing, man? Are you home again? Where are you?
Hello.
And he can hear a word we're saying.
I'm in the new lobby.
Well, got rid of the paneling?
They did. They
Wow.
Yeah. They must have watched that episode and been embarrassed.
Or else he got thrown out of the studio.
Well, there's
This is great. Like
news going on there.
Well, actually, the 1970s called and wanted their lobby back.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah. Hey, Bill, I appreciate you coming on the show tonight. I know that you got some. Are you doing okay?
Yeah, so far, but the heavy rain has just started and the water's halfway up the driveway. So like Saturday night, we'll be sweating out whether it gets in the house or not. Unbelievable.
I'm so sorry.
Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
we'll hold all the questions for the show because if we start talking now, then we have to go through the whole thing again when the show starts. So, and we have to wait for goodness. We've got everybody here, and we have. We never get. Oh, that's true. We never get everybody on the show this early in the game here, but we have to wait until the TV hits 30 after the hour. So,
Okay.
And then we will get this thing cranked up. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Let me do some here. Boy, the social media stuff is crazy. So now, I worked pretty long yesterday doing some stuff on the social side. I checked the Facebook metrics, and it's just stunning. See if I can do a screen share here. Let's do this. Application window. So, look at the post reach.
Oh, my goodness.
Holy mackerel.
Are those like unique?
22 billion. That's insane.
Are those uniques, James?
I don't understand. I need to go and see exactly how they. I really don't pay attention to it that much. I need to see how they calculate that number. I don't know. Stuff yesterday kind of went viralish.
I have
the Kevin, that tweet you put out with that with the water almost up to the traffic lights, didn't that go viral?
that has. Let me get you the exact numbers.
See, this is the boring personal stories part of WeatherBrains right here, and we're sharing these dull social media metrics.
That currently stands at 10,934 retweets, and impressions is 1,855,634.
Is that nuts or what?
That's one dopey tweet, and I'm trying to figure out why this particular picture resonated. And
well, I think it sums up the situation.
Yeah, but there are thousands of them that do.
Yeah, but that one really does it in one picture.
And it was early in the process too.
It's actually. Go ahead.
And you're Kevin Stelly. You're kind of a big deal.
No, that's what I can't figure out. I mean, where's my screen share? Oh, crud. Open it back up.
My engagement number is over 5 million. I've never had an engagement number over 5 million on Facebook before.
I got a note from Twitter early on. It was on my phone, and one of the times, not too long after it had started, I got this thing that popped up that said, "You're getting a lot of notifications. You can put in some filters. Do you want to do that?" I was like, "Well, I'd never seen that before." Well, like I said, I can't.
We'll talk about social media. This whole thing's going to be an interesting case study in so many different ways.
There's the picture. But the dog with the carrying the bag of food is better than that. This is actually just a screenshot from the gal, Brandy Smith from KHOU. I was watching she and her. Yeah, we were watching she and her photographer, and he was just panning around showing the things, and I was actually on my phone, and I was just screenshotting, and I went, "Oh, okay, let's do that." But I mean, the simplicity must have something to do with it, and you kind of have to look at it for a second. A lot of people have said, well, it took me a minute to realize. So I find it fascinating. And I guess I get what some of what James gets is, it's there for a while and it's really going, and then all the crazies show up, and it turns into a political thing, and a hate Trump thing, and a religious thing, and a global warming thing, and it's just like, that's a bunch of nonsense.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, no, I'm not going there.
And I picked that nursing home picture off the KHOU Facebook page. What I do, I go down and look at posts by visitors. There's some really good stuff. Like when there's active weather, that's a little tip. You go into these visitor posts, and I saw that on, I think it was KHOU, and I'm thinking, this is horrifying. But then I looked at it. In fact, I actually let it go on Twitter, and I deleted it within 30 seconds because, wait a minute. I said, wait a minute, this looks fake. This can't be right. This has got to be some kind of doctored image, and this cannot be right. And so I sat on it for about 3 hours, and when I saw the Galveston News and the mainstream outlets started to pick up on it.
Well, I saw it after you tweeted it, James, and somebody immediately said that has to be a fake picture. Just look at it.
Right. And I think the Capitol Weather Gang did the same thing in Washington. They put it out and they pulled it thinking it was fake. But I saw an actual photograph of those same people on our network news tonight, where they're fine and dry. But goodness, that was just horrifying. All right, it is time, guys. Let me get this thing started. Welcome to our television viewers. We're going to record this track and record this track. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 606. Wow, what was that? This is the show that's all about weather. And boy, do we have some weather to talk about this week. Got a full house and a lot of things going on here. But this is James, and you can see our regular panelists around the horn, including Rick Smith, warning coordination meteorologist, National Weather Service in Norman. Rick, how are you?
Doing good. Thinking about our Weather Service brethren and sisters in Houston and Corpus Christi and Brownsville and Lake Charles and Slidell and the Southern Regional Operations Center and all over the place. There's just we'll talk about a lot of that tonight, but so many people working so hard on this Harvey situation.
And do you know how many of them have been directly affected, Rick?
Some have. Some at the Corpus Christi office have, and certainly some at the Houston, probably a lot at the Houston office have in some way. As of earlier today, I think they were able to get back and forth to work. They're probably working 12-hour hurricane shifts, but I don't know how much longer that was going to last. So a lot of people are, and some weather service offices have taken to just, you take a sleeping bag and an air mattress and a food supply, and you just plan to camp out and live in the office. And so I know that the Weather Service is taking good care of them, and they're really, making sure that their families are okay and that they're okay and they have everything that they could possibly need. But it's tough for lots of people. There's a lot of people that are working very hard, but certainly the Weather Service people are in the community dealing with it, warning for it, forecasting it while their families are at home or their house is sitting there with water in it or whatever. So it's tough for everybody.
Absolutely. Kevin Selly, you are in Wichita Falls, Texas. You're in the great state of Texas, but far removed from the flooding.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because on Saturday night, I took a snapshot of this infrared satellite picture, and just the far outer edge of the Cirrus deck had gotten up to Wichita Falls from Harvey. And I was just struck because I went outside because the sunset was just beautiful. And so I put the two pictures together and tweeted that out. And, the contrast to think about what's under in Southeast Texas, those same clouds that look so pretty in Wichita Falls is stunning.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to Nate Johnson here. Nate is on the road. He's going to Wesley's Booby Trap or someplace. Nate, unmute that thing and let's see where you are here.
I think I just passed south of Clinton, North Carolina on Interstate 40. A little bit of light rain, the result of a potential tropical cyclone 10.
So, see, we've got our own correspondent, y'all, going to potential tropical cyclone 10 to cover this. So, Nate, we thank you for your courage and thank you for your time to go over there. Now, this is like a vacation trip, right?
It is. Yeah, I had to actually, we started vacation this past weekend, but I have a class that I teach at NC State, so I drove back into town for that, and then heading back to finish the vacation, starting here in about an hour and a half when I get back to the place where we're staying.
Awesome. Just join in when you can. We're honored that you're here. Brian Peters is the internationally beloved meteorologist, longtime warning coordination meteorologist, the National Weather Service in Birmingham, Alabama. Brian, how are you?
Doing fabulous. It's just certainly a mess over Southeast Texas, and my heart goes out to all those folks. And having been detailed to weather offices in the past, since I worked at a number of inland stations, Weather Service would send people from inland stations that were not affected to the coast to help out with the workload, but never anything as difficult and as bad as what's going on in Southeast Texas.
Yeah, and we're going to go to Texas here in just a minute, but let's see. Aubrey Urbanowitz is here. Aubrey, I guess you're nice and dry in Harrisonburg.
We are, but we could get some of the rain from the potential tropical system riding up the coast for tomorrow, and definitely some cooler temperatures. But yeah, I had to stop watching the coverage. It was too emotional for me. I mean, how I got into meteorology was hurricanes, and it just I can't even imagine what they're going through.
Right. And again, we are going to go back. Bill Murray. I see Kim here. Kim, you're with the party. Welcome.
Yay.
Hey.
I have a lot of questions for you, but I have so many questions, and I got so many smart people on this panel. I just can't wait. I have many questions for Kim about the societal side of this whole thing. But Bill, let's bring in our guest because he is right in the middle of things, and he should know a lot about this subject.
Yeah, he really is right in the middle of things there in League City, Texas. And of course, he's the former director of the National Hurricane Center. And as Alec Baldwin is to Saturday Night Live, he is to WeatherBrains because he's appeared so many times. He's almost like a permanent panelist. Bill Reed, welcome to the show.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to be here. This is my 12th 20-inch or greater rain event, first one in retirement, and first one and the second one that actually impacted my property. Right now, I'm an island in a lake, and it's raining hard.
What was the first one that impacted your property? Which one was that?
Allison in 2001. We had 20 inches of rain, and didn't get in the house. So I didn't have any real flood damage. Got some water damage to the car in the parking lot at the forecast office.
So Bill, how are you faring? Your family there? How are y'all making it?
Well, we thought we have everything in place. I'm not even on the flood maps. I'm in the X zone, which is outside a 500-year flood. And on Saturday night, we had 3 straight hours of 5 to 6 inch an hour rain. I ran out and emptied the gauge twice. I couldn't believe it. The water came up on the porch and reached the slab. I had about 3 inches left of freeboard before it would have gotten in the house. And then it stopped rising. And it took more than 24 hours for it to recede. The main creek that our floodwaters drain into here is 5 feet above its previous record right now. And I don't think the drainage can get to it. We just started raining about 2 hours ago, and it's already halfway back up the driveway.
Bill, can I jump in with a question related to that then?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Bill, this is Kevin in Wichita Falls. Because you're talking about creeks, and this is, I guess, sort of a more real-time question, because around 5:30 today, I saw pass on the National Weather Service chat that they had issued a mandatory evacuation for a small subdivision north of Houston, Inverness Forest or something like that.
Forest,
yeah. So, but my question then is that backs up to a little creek that has a levee system. And it seemed like it was, and I haven't checked for the last couple of hours, but they seemed pretty confident that they were talking levee breach or overtopping there. But that's an earthen levee, because I went and looked on the maps. And my first question is, how many of those, if you know, are around? And then if we're talking about these earthen levees being breached or topped, this is going to be a whole nother level with still 5 to 10 to 15 inches to go. Is that right?
Yeah, I would guess so. And I've not heard a lot about these small levees, and they never came into play in the floods I worked when I was in charge of the office here. So my guess is there's not too many of those in the area.
Okay.
So back when Tropical Storm Claudette, I guess, came, there was a huge rainfall total at Alvin, Texas, Bill. And I don't remember there being this level of flooding. Was it a more localized event?
Actually, it flooded down here. It flooded Clear Creek, which is the Friendswood League City area where I live, and Dickinson. You may have heard that the whole city of Dickinson was ordered evacuated today for the next flood wave coming down Dickinson Bayou. They exceeded the flood levels they had in Claudette on Sunday morning in Dickinson. And the population has changed. League City was about 18,000 people in 1979. It's over 100,000 now. Mm-hmm. So the target, the amount of people in harm's way, has grown phenomenally since the last big flood down here.
Mm. Well, Aubrey mentioned, this disaster news fatigue. I mean, literally, we started switching between the major Houston channels, streaming early this morning, and by the end of the day, you just feel so sorry for everybody that you see. The extent of the flooding seems to be phenomenal. So, one to Katrina, what's the impact of this one going to be, Bill, in terms of people and structures?
Well, just on raw numbers, I bet you it'll be in the same ballpark, but the degree of the rapidity and the depth to which the floodwaters hit New Orleans killed all those people, and we're not looking at that here. It's a more manageable rise. You can get people up, they can go up in their house, get people in there to rescue them and that sort of thing. But I think we'll measure in the tens of thousands at least in the number of structures flooded. Hopefully mine doesn't become one of them.
Bill, do you have any concept at this moment? I'm sorry, Bill.
No, go ahead.
Any concept at this moment, let's say either Metro Houston or Harris County, what percentage is flooded? Because it's that thing about the old Donald Rumsfeld thing, you're looking through a straw. We see all the pictures of the bad things, but how much is at some level flooded? Is there any way to know?
From a street infrastructure point of view, everyone. The lowest rainfall total I was found on the Harris County rain gauge network was 25 inches.
Yeah.
That's the county's about the size of Rhode Island, for God's sake. Down here on the southeast side, we're all going up over 40 inches tonight for total rainfall. A 10-inch rain will flood the streets, and if it falls fast enough, it'll get into some houses. So as far as houses, they actually had some discussion with the officials, and they're just so busy on rescuing people and trying to manage the human side of the disaster, they haven't got anywhere near any idea of the count of how many houses are flooded at this time. We may not really know that for a month.
Bill, this is Nate in North Carolina. There was a thread on Twitter yesterday, I think, talking about how over the last few years, Houston has intentionally turned some of its streets and interstates essentially into flood drainage. Can you talk about that a little bit and how the streets there are really kind of designed to channel water and how that may or may not have been successful in this case?
I actually sat in on a meeting early on in my tenure here where an engineer described that. It's part of the drainage plan for flat urban development is to use the streets as your first pass of a floodway. So, and it can handle a 5-inch rain. 5-inch rain almost anywhere here fills up the street, but your driveways and your houses are okay. As long as you don't park your car on the street, you don't get any damage. But when we blew by 5 inches in the first hour, so you exceeded the capability of the initial thing. And then you have the big drainage ditches along the neighborhoods and retention ponds. Most of those were full after about 10 inches. Everything after that becomes ponding and sheet flow across the flat urban terrain.
So Bill, it seems like the models did a great job. The forecasts were really good. It was evident, especially by early Saturday, and I'm sure earlier because I was deployed to Beeville, Texas to manage one of our hotels. But we were warning our hotels in Houston, as early as Saturday morning, this was going to be an unprecedented event. Was it ever a consideration, or will it be a consideration next time when an event of this magnitude comes, that maybe some evacuations might happen in advance of the flooding?
That's a good question. When you're talking in advance, though, you got a big blob laying over the area saying 25 inches or greater. Exactly who do you evacuate?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they put out the right language too. They said we're not going to order an evacuation, but if you have health issues to where being without electricity or trapped in your house for a long period of time could be of concern to you, you might want to go. That message was out there, and I actually know someone who heard that and said, "I'm out of here. I'm not going to deal with that." He's on oxygen and whatnot. So, but we killed 130 people in the Rita evacuation, and that was 2 million people, about 1,250,000 who shouldn't have left because they weren't ordered to. I just don't know how to effectively evacuate a 6.5 million place where maybe 2 million of them are in areas where they could get serious flooding in their houses, and another 2 million that could get moderate flooding, and not knowing in advance how to pinpoint it. At least with storm surge and a hurricane, you have zones that have the threat levels depending on the strength and size of the hurricane, and you can manage the call for the evacuation 48 hours in advance.
Kim, I'd like to hear your comment before Brian asks a question.
Yeah, this is an interesting point. Bill, Reed, and I actually went back and forth a little bit over social media in the hours ahead of landfall, talking about what we were observing as a lot of people not leaving. And at the time, there was a really interesting, hindsight's 50-50. We didn't know that it was going to be Houston. It was really unclear exactly where this band was going to set up. And that really was the conversation. It's Houston and all the outlying areas that possibly would have been in the line of fire. And how do you, with not only that spatial uncertainty, but all of the complex decisions that go into evacuating for a family, and knowing that they would have to be prepared to leave for an extended period of time, possibly. Those are not easy decisions to make. And I think our consensus was, well, we hope that what we're seeing from the traffic data being pretty clear is that a lot of people are, this may be a limited evacuation to the coastal areas. I think one of the things that's going to be interesting, feeding onto the questions that were just asked of you, Bill, is we don't necessarily know what people are going to do next time. So the lesson learned from this among the members of the public, I think, is something that's still open. It's a story that's yet to be told. And it's going to be a story that's assimilated by the local population in the days and weeks to come. It's going to probably be a function of how well disaster response proceeds from here. If response is really pretty good and people feel really well taken care of, I think that will decrease the tendency for people to maybe want to flee next time. And if the extended relief is actually really burdensome, then I anticipate people maybe learning a lesson of, well, maybe it's worth it to do this next time, even if I'm not in the immediate evacuation zone. This is still very disruptive to many communities around the region, economically and socially and so on. So I think for me, this just underlies a major point that we need to do better data collection from populations who are affected by these big disasters and try to understand what they're taking from each instance. The research on hurricane evacuation doesn't point to any sort of clear pattern. People who have gone through a hurricane in the past aren't necessarily more likely to evacuate in the future. There's a lot of nuance to it. And it's probably to do with a lot of situational factors. So I put out a call here for really, frankly, funding to get get those researchers down there and get this documented in the immediate aftermath. And as time progresses, to see what story unfolds and what people take away from this event.
Anecdotally, I can confirm what you say. After Rita, a big study was done about what went right and what went wrong, and they fixed that. And when Ike came along, people did what they were told to do by the elected officials. Post-study, they smartly went in and did the same study after Ike, and all these people that were without electricity for 2 or 3 weeks that were well inland, saying no way in hell are they ever going to stay for a hurricane again. So I think we're up against the same problem we had with Rita the next time of spontaneous evacuation out of fear. And oh, by the way, we have 1.1 million more people now in Houston than we had with Ike.
Oh my goodness! In less than 10 years.
About 600,000 of them have no hurricane experience. That came from the Council of Governments demographers group. It is just amazing.
So crazy. A lot of development.
And the flooding ignorance goes because of the 100-year floodplain flaws. You have to have flood insurance if you're in the 100-year floodplain. They really don't permit new building in the 100-year floodplain. So people go and buy a house, they're in the 110-year flood line. They're told they don't need flood insurance. And if you're not in our business and somewhat savvy about what that really means, you don't buy flood insurance. You don't think you're at risk. Then you get nailed by a flood and all kinds of hell breaks loose arguing with people why you didn't have flood insurance.
Now, Bill, I know that the flood insurance program is one of your favorite topics. I hope you don't mind if I ask a follow-up question on that point. We actually had a show about this a couple weeks ago with the Smarter, Safer Coalition coming on. The National Flood Insurance Program is up for reauthorization next month. And you may be aware of this. I'm wondering what your thoughts are going into that reauthorization, there actually was one coalition of members of Congress who were arguing that we should make it a requirement for people in the 500-year floodplain to be included in the risk pool and to expand the private and provision of insurance. I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yes, I actually wrote a letter to a congressman once why I thought that was a good idea. Only time I ever wrote a congressman, and they got a nice generic letter. And I know there was some discussion on the Hill about that, but lots of people pushed back on it. I just use me as an example when I go out and give talks and when I argue with people about it. I'm in the X zone and I got flood insurance. And right now it's sitting in a drawer up on top of a table in case the water comes in. I'm very glad to have bought it. And I can use my argument for it after an event like this to try to at least get the citizens educated as to why it's a good idea.
Be one of the few, apparently, Bill, that is in that position after the storm is over, whether you need it or not. What do you think the uninsured losses are going to be on this storm?
I'm in the prediction business, and I'm lousy at a lot of it anymore. It's part of getting older, I guess. But I bet you we have a $10 billion plus event.
Oh, goodness.
The economic losses on the front end are going to be ferocious. All these businesses they're all shut down right now. I did a little drive-by around the neighborhood. I can't get out of my side of town because the main road's cut off on the east side at I-45 and on the west side by a tributary to the Clear Creek. The one grocery store that was open had over 200 people waiting outside, and the news later reported it was a 3-hour wait to get in. And I wonder what they had on the shelves, because the trucks that come and resupply there can't get in. No gas stations are open. No drugstores are open. Workers can't get to work. And after Ike and Rita, it took weeks before the system got back in place. And this is going to be, the flooding part of it's going to be more widespread than either of those.
And, we saw Allison, hit the Texas Medical Center really, really hard. And I assume there was some hardening of those facilities in the wake of that storm. Talk about how the hospitals have fared this time.
I haven't seen the details. There was a headline in one of the stations this afternoon saying they were starting to get flooding in the medical center. That could mean anything. It could mean apartments. I think if it was a hospital, I think they would have jumped all over that with a full detailed report on it. So that, unless there's some more truth to that. Now, some of the outlying hospitals are having some problems. They actually had to evacuate a hospital, fairly sizable hospital down in Sugar Land this evening.
And, with the major floods like Allison, the tax day flood, the flood in 2016, I guess, is this more common than it was before, Bill, just anecdotally, or, bigger floods happening because of the development? What's your opinion on that?
Much of it is that the target is richer, but there's some studies being done by Dr. Nielsen Gammon up at Texas A&M, the state climatologist, that show a very strong correlation with the increase in the large flash flood events. And I forgot what he used to define large. The parallels what's going on with the thinking on climate change.
Brian, I know you wanted to ask a question of Bill, following up on what Rick talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, my question's a lot simpler than all these questions. Bill, I know that I've been to the Houston-Galveston area on a number of occasions, but I don't think I've been there since the latest weather office was constructed. How are they faring relative to the flooding?
Well, the facility, one of my shining accomplishments of living here, most proud of, was a collaboration with Galveston County to co-locate the forecast office in an EOC. And they built that thing. That was the proverbial brick outhouse. It is designed for Category 5 hurricane. The ground is upgraded six feet above grade, and the operations is on the second floor. I would ride out everything but a nuclear war in that building.
All right.
The staff, though, they all live around here, and guess what? They're all impacted by the floodwaters also. I think it was probably impossible for them to execute shift change on Sunday mornings. I don't think they could have gotten to the office. So the mid-shift had been on there for 12 hours working liquid Armageddon, probably ended up pulling a 24-hour in one of the worst events possible. I haven't heard of anybody currently working there having flooding in their house so far.
You can only hope so, because that's a horrible thing to have to deal with, knowing that you're working when your property is or families are at risk. That's a horrible thing. One of the things about coming into Galveston for Hurricane Alicia was I was from out of town, so the only thing I had was a rental car to worry about, whereas the other employees, they're all worried about families. And that takes you, that removes your concentration on the work, and the work is very, very important, but still you're worried about your families. So
that's true. Same thing as you have happen in the big tornado outbreaks. You're sitting there at work and worrying about a tornado hitting your house. A lot of people's jobs are like that.
Well, I read where the population of Houston is now 6.5 million. Is that an accurate number?
6.6 million, according to the Council of Governments, and that goes from Conroe all the way down to Galveston, and east a little bit and west a little bit.
Bill, I had a little bit of a
Chicago will be the third largest city in about 10 years.
Wow. A little bit of a hurricane physics question. Given its position and slow or no movement, how much has the drag coming from the air, coming from the water, and then hitting the land, slowing down, friction added to this?
Well, I think that's part of why we're getting the rains the other night were not that. It was more dynamically driven. What we have setting up this evening looks like there's like a pseudo front deformation kind of zone set up from just north of the center of the low on the coast and draped across right about where I live. And there's 80-degree dew points streaming into that at about 30 knots. And that boundary has just enough thermal differentiation on that. That's forming a nice little zone of uplift in there. It's otherwise the air isn't really all that unstable looking at the sounding. So it's dynamic lift that's driving it.
Bill, I have a question sort of going back to last week. And you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but I took some criticism on Twitter sort of at broadcasters generally, and I think some of it may be legit in that it didn't seem like the national media were picking up on, outside of the Weather Channel, were picking up on the potential threat. How did the local media do? I mean, do you feel like your fellow Houstonians were, knew this was coming, or do you feel like there might have been, room for improvement on the communication side on the front end?
I didn't watch a whole lot of local media, believe it or not, until the event actually started unfolding. But what I did watch, I mean, they were, I won't name names either. Most of them were sticking with the party line, so we had consistency of message. One kept showing an in-house model, which was BS. It's something someone else provided, I'm sure. They don't have the computers to run their own models. It showed the storm coming in south of Corpus and going to Laredo. To me, that is unethical.
I know what model that is because we have access to the same data, and I looked at it. It was just horrible. I mean, it wasn't even remotely close to reality. And I don't even use that much on the air anymore. Brian, you know the one I'm talking about because you work here too. Yeah. And at some point, you've got to say this is. I don't think we can be formula people in the weather business. You have to, think, and if you've got something that's just not right, don't stick it in there just because you're some consultant or some news director or some, guy mandates that you run this. Throw it out. If you get fired, you get fired. I mean, come on. I mean, in a situation like this, you can't show information that's bad like that because you're sending a horrible message to people.
Yeah,
You
have people in my view of how the world works, nobody wants to evacuate. So their preset attitude when they're being told they might have to evacuate is, no, I don't want to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if we give them a consistent message that shows the threat is coming, everybody's on the same page, we might just get them to say, damn it, it means me, I better go. As soon as they hear something that might mean the threat isn't them, that gives them their already preset mind says, I don't want to go. That gives them a reason to say, I better wait. I don't think it's going to come here. To me, it's just totally unethical to do that.
Well, name names, James. You got to do it because we got to know. I mean, people got to know. And I'm not joking. I know you're laughing, but seriously, I mean, a lot of people listen to the show and they should have a heads up as to what it is.
You talk about this model. It's the RPM that's offered by the weather company that inputs into these WSI boxes. That's what it is. And and listen, every model's got a bias. Every model's got issues, and I have not had much luck with that RPM with tropical systems. It does okay during synoptic. It does okay during large-scale synoptic systems in the cool season. It doesn't handle summer convection well. It tends not to do tropical well, and that's just my opinion. And if somebody wants to dispute that, then they can come on the show and give us some numbers. Bill, grade the National Hurricane Center as a former director, the man at the top. You know that place better than anybody else. Give him a grade on this one.
I'd have to look at it more to be certain. I didn't see any serious fly. I thought they did a pretty good job of upticking once it started to intensify. They hinted at it, but the models, they didn't really have any guidance that hinted at a Cat 4 when it was a depression. And think about it. This thing went from a depression to a Cat 4 in 48 hours.
Yeah.
And the guidance I was looking at for intensification brought it up to a moderate Cat 1. Normally, I add a category just to build in because of lack of confidence in the models being that good. So I don't see anything that would have called it a Cat 4. The track forecast was spot on. We were forecasting it to the general location of the Central Coast when it was a wave.
Hey, Bill, I might add that it went to a Cat 4 in a little over 500 miles too.
Yeah,
it wasn't like a large fetch. It was a relatively short fetch. I mean, the 48 hours is a relatively short time frame, but 500 miles, that's pretty quick.
Yeah. Now we have some history of storms doing it down there. Celia,
right?
1932, Audrey, they come out of the Bay of Campeche. Now, I wasn't privy to how the coordinations went or decisions on warnings. That's what I would, as director, I was far more interested in that. I actually think they do the science very solidly, so I don't ever worry about that part of it. It's more on how well we coordinate and convey with the decision makers and emergency management and the forecast offices. And of course, I'm out of that loop, so I really have no idea how that went.
So Bill, we had. I'm sorry, Nate. Go ahead.
Speaking of the conveying of information, something that got discussed, and I think it's a really valid question. We talk about how it spun up to a Category 3, Category 4, it moved on shore, and then it was downgraded to a tropical storm or downgraded to a lower category, while Houston's still on the front end of the bit. I know, you've said this a million times. There's no such thing as just a tropical storm. Is it time that we rethink the categorization of these storms in terms of how we share this information with the public so that we don't inadvertently downgrade a storm that's still likely to kill people?
Well, in a perfect world, I wouldn't have a scale. I would use what the wind speed, surge, and rain are going to be and what the impacts are. But we've got it. We're going to use it. So, and what would you use? I mean, rain doesn't correlate with intensity of the storm. In fact, most of our heavy rains occur while the storm's a tropical storm and not a big hurricane. Down here, at least, it's probably not true on the northeast for landfalling hurricanes. So, I think I don't think there was a letting down of the guard around here about the rain threat. Everybody had been hit for days with this thing. When it comes inland, is going to stall and give us feet of rain. That message didn't change at all, best I could tell around here. The Weather Channel was very on message about how bad the flooding was going to be, and all my social media contacts. I mean, I was busy as all get out Thursday and Friday answering questions on how bad I thought the rain and flooding was going to be. So I think, while I don't like the fact that we end up with only a Cat 1 or only just a tropical storm. I don't think in this case it hurt anything.
Yeah. Bill, if you don't mind me asking you a follow-up question to that, how, in your personal experience, have you done with all of the tornado warnings? As of earlier today, there have been over 150 issued by the Houston office. What has that been like for you to go through?
Well, a half a dozen of them were right over my house. So it's, the homeowner in me said, "Oh crap," and the meteorologist in me said, "Why is this happening at night where I can't see it?" But there was definitely rotation in the signals you're supposed to warn for on a tropical tornado outbreak were there on the radar. Whether they were producing or not, I don't know. I don't think anyone's had a chance to even think about verification on any of that.
Yeah.
Bill,
it's interesting. Speaking of that, it was almost as if after a while people started to ignore those things. I don't know what the FAR is going to be. And that's the next question. Do you think that the local guys at the Weather Service office in Houston have made the right call in issuing so many tornado warnings?
Well, if very few of them verified, probably not. Some early on, we had good citizen video of, looked pretty impressive. There on the day of landfall and shortly thereafter, there had several tornadoes go up the west side that probably were solid EF1s and had a little bit of length to it. Most of the tropical ones I've dealt with, you might get one good volume scan on the radar that indicates it, and then it's gone. In the old days, we didn't really warn for those. We put out a statement saying these things will spawn tornadoes at any time now. Good luck.
And it almost seemed like, and I've tried to watch some of the local media, that it almost seemed like after a while the meteorologists just they mentioned it and then they just went right back to flood coverage. The way I would do it, hey, if there's a tornado warning, I'm on the air. I mean, news can't have it. I've got to have it. But it just seemed like after a while the stations kind of lost priority. I got one more question, Bill. Do you think that the people on the Middle Coast down toward Rockport have been kind of ignored after the Houston flooding where this thing actually came in?
Certainly by the media, I've seen nothing about it. Mm-hmm. So part of that, maybe it's a little difficult to get in there. It's pretty one way in, one way out, and I don't know what the road conditions are after landfall down there. So, and it's Texas. Heck, when I was at the Hurricane Center, a storm go up the East Coast, the national media was up and down my throat all the time before, during, and after the storm. With Ike, almost had to beg them to go on the air with it.
Yeah, and that was the case with Katrina. The people in coastal Mississippi felt totally ignored by the national media because they all focused on New Orleans, where they got no publicity. And I'm starting to see some of that from the Middle Coast, where there's so much damage down toward Corpus Christi and Rockport and Port Aransas and things like that. And again, it's just the way it is. I mean, the national media is going to focus on these big cities instead of some of the rural areas. But we have to remember, all of us, that it's not just the city of Houston that's in need. It's folks down there too.
Yeah, and damage, from what I could tell, one of the Josh Morgerman's a crazy hurricane chaser friend of mine, and I talked to him at length, and he said the damage was pretty extensive there from Fulton and Rockport down to just east of Corpus Christi.
Yeah, Bill, I was in Beeville with a hotel full of evacuees from that area, and it was heartbreaking Saturday with especially elderly people that didn't know where they were going to go, what they were going to come back to. They had left mobile homes, and they saw images of their mobile home parks destroyed. It was a very sad, depressing time, and our goal was just to try to help in any way we could. And so what are some of the best ways that, as a Houstonian right now, what are some of the best ways the rest of the country can help?
Wow. Well, your favorite charities don't need stuff, they need money.
Yeah. Bingo.
They're already having to assign people, volunteers to piling stuff somewhere that keeps getting sent in. It's kind of like taping windows. It's been out there forever that you donate your stuff, but that's never been in for many decades now, that's not been the recommended track people should take. I mean, that's where it is. And of course, thoughts and prayers for the folks going through it, because they still got, especially the ones that are flooded, a long road ahead of them.
So Bill, did you miss being on television this weekend?
I was in my easy chair with my big dog in my lap and the laptop on the edge of it, and a cup of coffee, and unshaven in my gym shorts. What do you think?
I think the answer was no, by the way.
That is the show title, ladies and gentlemen. And Bill, you're on WeatherBrains, man. Come on, don't get any better than this. I mean, this is the ultimate right here. So there you go.
I shaved today. How about that? I'm still in a t-shirt and gym shorts, but I did shave today.
Hey, do you miss it at all, Bill? On a serious note,
it's very strange. When I worked Hurricane Irene, that was my 40th year of work, counting the Navy and the Fed. I didn't have the adrenaline rush. I could do the job and work 18 hours a day and keep doing a good job with it, but I lost the adrenaline rush for the operation. And it's still gone. The thing I miss the most about working is the camaraderie with fellow scientists, all day, every day type of thing, and just talking about what the weather's doing and things like that. The actual work I did, I don't miss at all, believe it or not. And I think that's why I don't miss when the TV gig dried up due to funding issues on their side and mine. I wasn't going to work for less. I didn't go out and look for another TV job right away. I sort of thought back, and James, you might be, and Nate, you can answer this better than I can, but I got the impression from the folks at the station I was working with that the philosophy in the broadcast world is you've got to dumb it down to like a 5th or 7th grade level to get the message out to people, and that's just not me.
Yeah.
Well, it's some consultant guy, and I don't even want to go down that path. But yeah, they tend. And here's the thing, and we do have to understand that there are many people that do consume these products on television that aren't scientists, that maybe don't understand. And I tell this all the time. We have to hang out in Dollar Generals and Walmarts where real people are.
Mm-hmm.
Talk with, forget these consultants and all these guys. Let's go talk with the real people. And I think there's a good there's a good compromise somewhere in there where you can still be a scientist and communicate some pretty good technical information, yet at the same time make it easy to understand for Joke You public.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do. But I do agree, more and more you hear, well, on television, just go in there and tell a quick story. But the nice thing about it for me, I use the digital side to do all the serious stuff, the blog posts, the videos we do over here. That's where I do all the good stuff. And on television, I am in there telling a story. But it is a changing business. And the next question is, how did the WEA system work with all these tornado warnings out there? Bill, the wireless emergency alerts. Do you think that system worked pretty well this time?
It did at my house. I'm getting the flood warnings now, and it actually works. I immediately drop what I'm doing, and in my case, I go look at the radar and other data to see just how imminent the threat is to our house. But I am a little concerned that a lot of people probably not in this event because the weather was going on and it was really bad. They probably didn't get upset about it going off all the time, but it's always been a concern about warning alerts is that people will try to turn it off because it bothers them if they're not impacted.
Yeah, I was interested to have a lobby full of people Friday night, watching the storm, and to hear the WEA alerts going off intermittently around the room. And we never once had a flash flood warning for B County. So they were coming for Victoria and other places, and and people eventually started to complain about it. So I think we've really got to get these things down to a polygon level, or at least close to it.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize they weren't polygons. See, that's how I don't keep up with that. Yeah.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion on the show lately, and I know some carriers do it differently than others, but I would jump every time I would hear one because, that would mean that I missed something.
Uh-huh.
I was watching the warnings for for B County particularly, and telling everybody what was going on. And so I was kind of surprised by that. James, you'd have been proud of me. I bought an entire week's worth of clothing at the Floresville Walmart Thursday night, and wore it all weekend.
Yes, fantastic. That's where I hang out. Bill, back to the local office in Houston. This has got to be a strain on these guys. We struggled after our April 27, 2011 outbreak. They've got families that are struggling with the floods. They're working these horribly long hours. What's the process for winding down after this thing is over for them? Is there any support, any help if they need it? Because we sure needed some in our case 6 years ago.
Yeah, we went through that with Allison and with a big flood event in October '94 that went on for days, and we were pretty much on our own to handle the de-stress mode of it. Did what I could to reduce the amount of workload that was going on, but the trouble is the weather goes on, and I don't know if they have I don't even know if they have the staffing profile within the Weather Service where you can to send other people in to relieve the staff. We did some of that during Hurricane Katrina and Rita. With that busy season there, we sent people to other offices to help relieve the workload on the staff, but it's tough.
What is it like in the Hurricane Center or these local offices during something like this? Obviously, with what we have to do, we can't walk a mile in your shoes. How hectic is it, say, in the Hurricane Center on a situation like this?
Truth be told, in my opinion, it's far more stressful and hectic at the forecast office at landfall, because you're the point of contact for thousands of people, all your local decision makers, members of the public, first responders, all the products you have to issue. The Hurricane Center does a lot of that work in the background. The director and usually one other person are the designated spokespeople, and they handle the brunt of the external coordination, which is very high level. You're talking state level EOCs and the feds up to the White House, which some people think is stressful. I found that kind of fascinating, talking to the big boys, but it was scheduled and you did your job and whatnot. But compared to the forecast office at landfall, it wasn't nearly as bad. It's just crazy when the thing's approaching, and you have people. Sometimes you have people in decision maker positions panicking and crying about what they're getting ready to face in their community, and you have to keep your calm so that you can get the message across to them. At the end of one of those events, I was pretty much a limp noodle.
Second show title.
How about a limp noodle unshaven in his gym shorts?
Well, at least he's wearing his gym shorts. We know you're not wearing yours, Brian.
Yeah, there. The other side of you've got the Hurricane Center. We hear about that. You got the Weather Prediction Center. We hear about that. You got the local forecast offices, but there's a support staff kind of behind the scenes that really helps with a lot of this at the regional headquarters. So in Fort Worth, for example, there's a regional operations center. And one of our forecasters, Jonathan Kurtz, has been there. They called and said, could you come help us out? So he dropped everything he was doing and went there early Saturday morning, and he's been there all week, and he's going to get to go to FEMA Region 6 and do briefings there. But they are kind of the lifeline between the WFO, the forecast office, and any support they might need. And they can't do everything, but they are doing a much better job than they did in the past, Bill, I think, of keeping up with some of those critical stress debriefing and mental health issues, and at least monitoring for that. I know they've helped us with some of our events, and so that is better maybe than it used to be. But as far as getting extra staff, I know they're gearing up to send some extra people to Houston to relieve them. They've sent some extra people to Corpus to help with damage surveys and things like that. So there's a lot of infrastructure working behind the scenes at the regional operations center and at the regional office, and that's helping. So there's still only so much they can do, but there's a lot there. Then it's gotten much better, I think, over the past few years.
Rick, I want to ask a question along those lines. Do you have a sense, and Bill, you may know too, since you're local, do you have a sense of what the staffing levels are like at the Texas offices? Because I've heard that, a lot of offices are down 1 or 2 or 3 people, and it's been slow, getting the hiring, moved through the systems and the bureaucracy. Do you have a sense of whether or not they were fully staffed even before this event happened, and whether or not that may or may not have played a role in their being ready? By the way, not to say that they weren't ready, because they did a great job. I'm not saying that at all. Just saying, are they staffed to be able to handle, like you said, the weather keeps going on and on?
I actually know for a fact that the Houston office recently became fully staffed for the first time since 2008. I don't know. I have no idea about Corpus.
Yeah, I don't know about Corpus or any of the other offices. I did know Houston was fully staffed, and yeah, I think any of the offices that we have plans for this. We practice this. In fact, the Norman office was the 3rd level backup for the Austin San Antonio office. The Austin San Antonio office's backup offices were Corpus Christi and Brownsville. So we were doing backup exercises last week. Office getting ready. God forbid that we would have to issue flash flood warnings for the hill country there, but we practiced that, and so the staffing is part of that. But yeah, they're working, and Bill, you know more about this than I do, but they're working 12-hour shifts, so it's basically about half the staff on at a time, and a lot more people that would normally be on a normal shift. But I know Corpus supplemented their staffing. A forecaster from Nashville, for example, is down there helping out with things. So they it's something, but I don't know what the staffing levels were, but I know that they, from everything I've seen, everybody's done a pretty good job, a great job, actually.
Rick, flesh that out a little bit.
I forgot one little point there. After Rita, one of the benefits that we had from being co-located with the county EOC is they hired a crisis counselor. And our staff was included in being made available. The counselor was made available for anyone on the staff that wanted to spend some time with a crisis counselor. I don't know if anything ever got followed up. That was one of the best practice ideas. I filtered back on that. I don't know if it ever came to fruition within the agency to have that capability after a big traumatic event like this.
We continue to push it. They just had an MIC conference a few weeks ago, and my boss brought this up, that we've done the critical stress debriefing and how beneficial it is, and the Weather Service needs to do a lot more of that kind of thing, and I think we're getting better at that too. So, Kevin,
Rick, flesh that out for us. What does doing backup exercises mean? Tell us what that is.
Well, for example, if we were to fully back up the Austin San Antonio office, we would need to be able to issue all their flash flood warnings and tornado warnings for them. We would have to be able to issue all their river flood warnings. We'd have to be able to issue their terminal aviation forecast. We would have to become essentially the Austin San Antonio office. We'd have to do their social media, their NWS chat. So we're just testing all of those capabilities, and it's really a lot of type the things, do we have the right files, the right config files to do this or that? But we learned a lot of things, and we do practice all the time. We practice with all of our backup offices, and all the Weather Service offices do that. But it's mainly it's a lot of technology. It's a lot of being able to. We just have to become that office and up our staffing and do whatever we would have to do that. I'm glad we didn't have to, but we were ready to.
And is that decision handled?
That goes for the national offices too, right? Like SPC has a backup, and the Hurricane Center has a backup as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah, I know the SPC does because we're neighbors with them. But every Weather Service office, and really we used to just have one level of backup. Now we have secondary and tertiary after probably some tropical situations that over the past several years. But yeah, every office has a backup.
Hurricane Center has WPC in Washington, Silver Spring, and Honolulu takes over the Eastern Pacific. So they actually divide up the responsibilities if we go down.
We also have continuity of operations plans where if it was an extended outage, let's say that the Corpus Christi office had been taken out or something, or seriously damaged, and they were out of commission for weeks and weeks, then there would be, you know, we would send staff from the Corpus office who could go to the Brownsville office or whatever. So there's a lot of planning and practicing that goes on all year long. People always want to know, what are you doing when you're not issuing tornado warnings? Well, that's one of the many things that goes on in a weather office, is you're practicing for this kind of thing.
Fascinating.
So Bill, the 25th anniversary of Andrew was just within the past week. Talk about South Florida.
South Florida. I'll bet you less than 10% of the people that live there now were there for Andrew. Place has grown like a weed also.
Yeah.
They had a pretty big media event and museum. Norcross wrote a book about it, so he was out doing book signings and talks. So they used that anniversary to remind people of what can happen when the big one comes in there. I just wonder, with so many new people there, if it's stuck home on them there.
So Bill, you probably heard some stories about that night in the old Hurricane Center building. Tell us a story we haven't heard before.
Huh.
Stump the director.
Or just make one up.
Just make one up.
The guys didn't talk about, they didn't talk about that much about what was there. I mean, the things they talked about that were somewhat harrowing was when you could hear the lift on the roof and they weren't on the top floor. The radar blew off the roof and the dome ended up in a Holiday Inn a couple blocks away. The CNN reporter that was there, his car was flipped over and landed on one of the employees' cars. But their power almost went out. They were down the phone lines for communications for a while, and they were obviously really stressed out because they had their family sitting out there in 160-mile-an-hour winds. And Max Mayfield's wife was posting pictures of what their house looked like after that, and it looked like a bomb had gone off. All the trees were down, and roof was peeled back, and they had a house that was probably designed for 130-mile-an-hour wind.
Hey, let me ask one question back to Harvey on communication. The Weather Service now, Bill, is in the direct communication business with social media. And with the Weather Service mainly uses Facebook and Twitter. They do a little bit with Periscope. How do you think they performed with this, with Harvey, from the Hurricane Center and from the local offices?
I only do Facebook. I don't keep up with the Twitter feeds. They're kind of like in between Twitter and a blogger, so I like the fact that I can write more on a Facebook thing. So, and most of my cadre of friends and acquaintances are active on Facebook, so I pretty much stay there. And I didn't see a whole lot of postings. They were posting stuff in there. Hurricane Center's got a pretty good routine on it, and it highlights the latest thing and points people back to the website to get the details on it. So I think that worked pretty good. It becomes a staffing issue. We're busy with all the official products, and once you run out of people to do that, who's going to keep up with all the social media?
And that's an issue you have. And Rick Smith, you're the grand poobah of the Weather Service social media. I think they've done a great job, just personally. And I've looked at the Weather Service offices in Houston and Corpus Christi, the Hurricane Center. Rick, how would you grade their performance on social?
I honestly didn't look in detail at everybody's. I was mainly on Twitter because that's just so much easier to monitor. But everything I saw, I mean, there was some really good stuff. I mean, there were some really powerful graphics. Some of the things, at least in the Twitter world, that got a lot of attention, that went viral, were a graphic, for example, that headquarters did. Was it yesterday or the day before? Anybody, Kim, you might know, but it was the graphic about where they just said, this is unprecedented. We're in uncharted waters. We don't really know what's going to happen. It was something to that effect. And that was a really powerful graphic. And it was just a simple graphic. So I think there were some innovative things done, some new ways to communicate the message. And I saw some really cool things. So I know I took some notes on things that what I want to duplicate in our office. Hey, can I make one more comment, and then I'm going to ask Kim something real quick? Kim mentioned earlier, the importance of getting down there and getting information from people. And I know that we're already, we're dispatching people from all over the Weather Service to go down and help with damage surveys. And I always argue, and I think I've probably talked to Kim about this, we don't do enough of, if we put half as much energy in doing people surveys as we did damage surveys, we would learn a lot more. And Kim, there was a question in the chat, maybe, would you agree with that? And then if you had, Kim, if you had an open checkbook and unlimited resources, what would happen with you and your colleagues in the behavioral sciences and social sciences after Harvey?
Wow, unlimited checkbook. That's wow.
Give Kim a minute to collect himself.
Yeah, no, I actually find myself, every time there's an event like this, I find myself so jealous of the rest of the meteorological community, because you all have the ability to open up a browser and interrogate a storm with so many tools, and you can come up with so many different renderings of forecasts, and you have so many observations that I'm jealous. We don't have nearly as much to work with as events are unfolding to understand what messages are people receiving, how are their beliefs updating through time, because it's not just enough to look back retroactively and get the data after they've already gone through the event. We know there's post hoc rationalization that goes on, and it's really hard to understand some of the deep-seated issues with communicating uncertainty when you don't have that within event data. And if there's anything that I would wish for, it'd be a better observational system. And I've had the chance to argue for this in a number of different forums. I know it's something that's being considered by the Weather Service and OAR, the research arm on Sun Level. And doing it right would take a lot more than what we get with service assessments. I love, Rick, your idea to arm at least those who do go out to do damage surveys and get something. It would be so much more than we have. And if I could have, my wish list, it would be to have that really good within event documentation. There are some researchers who get independent funding to go out and try to do some of this. The University of Pennsylvania Wharton Business School, where Howard Kunreuther is one of the best ones. And I know that they had a grant to look at hurricane landfalls for a couple of years, and so they documented Sandy and I think Irene. And they looked a couple, as the storms were coming toward the coast, day after day, what forecast information were people getting? What did they believe was likely to occur? How were they preparing or not preparing? And they were one of the groups that was able to document that there was an issue with the fact that the hurricane warning was taken away. And that at the last minute really caused some significant issues with folks going, oh, well, no hurricane, I'm fine. And we wouldn't have known that was as significant an issue as it was without some of their insights. So anyway, with my magic wand, that's what I would make happen. And Rick, I love your idea to try to mobilize our existing workforce to try to get some of that, at least some of that done.
What would you do, like physically? Would you just start going, just run into the shelters and start asking people questions?
That's a great question. Surveying is actually getting increasingly difficult. What would immediately come to mind for me is doing dense surveying in the places that could be affected and trying to stratify that sample really heavily leaning toward the vulnerable populations, because I feel like those are the people we should really try to connect with and make sure that those who have real struggles in response, we're documenting what they're doing and what we can do to help them. In particular, I don't think that we stratify or think about stratifying the populations that we serve very well. But I would be inclined to do something like that. It's growing increasingly challenging, though, as fewer people have landlines. And more people are moving to cell phones, and there's been a marked increase in abuse of telemarketers, and people don't answer the phone as often anymore. So you sort of have to have these prearranged samples where there are people who have signed up by survey sampling companies, and they know that they're going to get paid to answer surveys. So it's something that would take funding, but you can get a pretty good sample. You obviously are going to miss some of the folks who don't own, cell phones, who don't know how to access those companies, and we know that there are some folks, especially lower income folks, who aren't in those pools. But at least to get you something. Humans are much more difficult to observe than the atmosphere. It turns out that they have to be party to the observation, and that causes a lot of challenges, actually. But that would be the way that I would think to go, because during the disaster, you don't want to do anything to potentially cause harm to yourself or to the participant.
I think that's why they invented Facebook Live, so that you can watch everybody now.
There are people who are trying to use data like Twitter and publicly available Facebook posts to mine them for some insight about what's going on. That's something that I know the folks at NCAR are focusing on very keenly. Can they take data from Twitter, especially people talking about hurricanes? It'd be great to know what they got from Harvey, and go back, look at the hurricane-related information, but then also go back to the entire live stream of everything these folks put out so they can learn more about them and understand more deeply what their comments were about and how they were understanding the information and passing it along. And they're teaming up with big data people to get that stuff done. So there's a lot of cool stuff we're trying to do with social media data. It's a really good point.
And so if you had 10, 15, 20 people or whatever, would going into shelters and asking people their thought process be something of interest, or that would not work?
So from a just strictly data collecting perspectives, it would be amazing to have some of that. From a more ethical perspective of what people are going through in those moments and intervening in a time that's a very critical crisis moment. I think that is actually really challenging, and it's a sort of a classic challenge for disaster scientists to their methods. Jen Henderson, a friend to many on the show, posted something from, she has this great outfit called the Disaster Collaboratory, and she had come up with some ethical principles for people who want to do post-disaster response and treating populations with care. And that's one of the things that's sort of discussed a little bit. It's very, very important to try to be respectful of what people are going through and to beyond anything else cause no harm. So I think crisis situations are notoriously some of the most difficult to study for human subjects research. And we have to walk a very fine line in our area of work to be sure we do this ethically, but that we collect the data that will be useful to save lives down the line.
I'm fascinated by that because no, go ahead, Rick.
Just real quick, I was going to say there's a couple of researchers in the Weather Center that do this. It's in a different setting on a different scale, but we have a lot of people that come shelter in our building. So they're kind of doing this on a different scale where they're doing surveys. Why did you come here? What made you come here? Where did you get your warning? So yeah, but it's a whole different thing with the hurricane shelters.
And as a point to what you said, Kim, I was in a shelter, basically a hotel, with probably less vulnerable populations, but I found that they wanted to talk because I set myself in the lobby with my computer and, just, spoke to everybody and, talked and put them at ease. And they started coming up to me and telling me, wanting to talk about the situation and, why they did some of the decisions they did. So I thought it was an interesting dynamic that they wanted to talk about their situation to me.
Absolutely.
So that was interesting.
Yeah, and there could be opportunity if you go to public forums and perhaps you make it known that you're there, and if people want to come and talk with you, they're free. That might be a different thing from trying to
sticking a microphone in their face.
Right. Yeah. And that might be a different thing entirely. And there are people who absolutely love to talk about these things. When I went. How I met you, Bill, and James was after the April 27th, 2011 tornado outbreak, and I came and interviewed many survivors of that outbreak, and everyone that I encountered wanted to talk to me, and they were very forthcoming, and I I was very mindful to be, sure that they knew that they could decline to talk if they didn't want to talk, but they definitely, I mean, everyone did. So there's a possibility. You're putting yourself in a dicey situation if you are a researcher who's putting yourself in the risk situation as well. So there's a lot to consider in all of that. I would personally like to see something that's a little bit more detached, just because it also might be more generalizable. We could get a sample that's
those people took action. Yeah, so they
again,
did
we're talking about the land of dreams and wishes. You're talking in the land of practicality. Anything would really be helpful.
Hey, Kim.
Kevin said an unlimited budget. Bill Reed, I know you're champing at the bit to get something in here.
Yeah, first on mining Twitter data, I know that was one of the recommendations for emergency management that came out of Irene when they found out people weren't taking the right actions up in New York State and Vermont for the flash flooding. Someone thought that you could mine that data and see if the Twitter talk that was going on, or any social media for that matter, if people were saying things that were counter to what you expect them to be doing, maybe you can change your messaging to really get, hey, folks, you're doing the wrong things. You don't understand. This is what's coming up. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Kim, because it's been a while since I've been in the loop on that, but our mutual good friend, Dr. Bill Hook, had a, if I could only get people to believe me type project. Remember, you know what the National Transportation Safety Board is? Yeah. His idea was a national disaster survey board, I think, for lack of a better word, that would go in after these disasters and do the soup to nuts surveying. I mean, we do the best job we can internally, but I think it could be done so much better.
Yeah.
If it was done by a group of people that were put together with just that idea in mind, is to see what worked and didn't work and try to have a formal way of fixing it.
I'm so glad you brought that up. For those who are listening, I refer you to, I think it was a BAMS article that Dr. Hook wrote with Dr. Gina Esco about 10 years ago, outlining this idea. It was really, child of the AMS policy program, both of them in it. And the problem with what we do now is we really only collect data in service assessments with the NOAA perspective. So we're wearing the Weather Service glasses, and they go in and they ask about weather service products and any issues pertaining to weather service stuff, because that is the domain of the Weather Service, and that is what they, can do and do something about. And it misses the entire weather enterprise. There's so much more that is going on and that is being conveyed, and so many parts, so many organizations involved in the pre-disaster setup, in crisis response and crisis communication. And after the event has gone on, the Weather Service, their role is kind of ended for the most part, but there is a lot of post-disaster work that really shapes how the communities are going to continue to recover. And all of that is sort of missed and not documented, or it's documented in pieces. It's not done as a cohesive whole. So you can imagine a world where FEMA, NOAA, the CDC, and state and local governments are all part of this larger reporting mechanism where there is a group that is responsible for documenting not just these as individual pieces, but the relationships among them. Treat them as the whole that they are. They've done this in transportation because they identified correctly that there are so many interdependencies in all those system parts. We have the exact same thing. We have lots of dependencies in our communication ecosystem, and we, in the service assessment toolbox, really just treat the one little part. So I think it's a tremendous idea. I truly hope this can be an opportunity for it to get revisited and for someone to perhaps pick that up.
Cool.
Do you have any other thoughts on it, since you were also a fan of the idea?
Yeah, I think, well, you hit the key points. I actually led a couple of disaster surveys and was the recipient of a few from events there, so I participated. And I always felt like we missed the key issues. Some of the same things kept showing up over and over again, and I said, we don't know what we're looking for.
a question for you and for Rick in the Weather Service. Do you guys feel that the recommendations that are made in those assessment reports get mobilized to really affect change?
Some do. I mean, some of the things that were in the events that I had worked have been implemented over the years. So, but again, they're mostly the internal ones. I think the points you made about trying to learn more about why people do what they do and not do and change that dynamic is going to require something different than what we're doing, because that doesn't we don't really address, we're not, for the most part, we're not qualified, I don't think, to really get to the heart of that matter.
So Bill,
guys,
the new advisory's out, and it's pretty much the same. But what do you think, looking at all this, increasing convection or rainfall on the radar right now? What do you think is going to happen overnight?
Well, I've gotten 3 inches since we talked. I've now gone past 40 inches here at the house. But on the good news side, the water level is stationary and midway up the driveway. So I still got a foot or so of freeboard. My history of landfalling tropical cyclones is they maximize their rain over land at night, usually in the 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. time frame. And I've been running a loop of the 1 hour precip, and we're starting to get some 3 inch an hour rain rates in those cells just to the east of me out over the bay and just offshore, and some 4 inch rainfall rates down near Freeport, and it ain't moving. So I think somebody, I don't know where exactly, but somebody's going to get a ton of rain tonight out of this thing. It's going to be a smaller area than the last 2 nights.
What's stunning, too, is I've been sitting here watching at the GOES 16 loop, and the circulation center is completely removed from any convection now. But, and this is only good for people listening live, here at 9:47 Central Time on the western semicircle, the cloud tops are cooling, and you're starting to see some radar echoes around the center, almost like what would, I guess, be a new, possibly developing wall. It'll be amazing to see what happens in the morning or overnight.
Yeah, I think we got a little bit of southwesterly shear work in that, so it'll struggle to redevelop a pure tropical look on with the interaction with land and that deformation zone. But maybe that's wishful thinking. The last thing we need is to jack it up to 60 knots and push a little storm surge in the bay while the floodwaters are coming down the rivers.
Right.
Yeah. No more surprises. Hey, we got to take a quick break here. And Aubrey, have you got time for email?
I've got a couple minutes.
Okay, cool. Let's roll Brian, and we'll do email right after that. WeatherBrains rolls along. Don't go away. Here we go, Brian.
No one with Professor Peters.
Last week, we discussed the primary factors involved in bringing those spectacular fall colors to the trees. So just where can you find the best color? You can find autumn color in parks and woodlands, in the cities, countryside, and mountains. Just about anywhere you find deciduous broadleaf trees. Those are the ones that drop their leaves in the autumn. Nature's autumn palette is painted on oaks, maples, beeches, sweet gums, yellow poplars, dogwoods, hickories, and others. Some neighborhoods may even be planted with special trees that were selected for their autumn color. New England is rightly famous for the spectacular autumn colors in the trees of its mountains and countryside, but the Adirondacks, Appalachians, Smoky Mountains, and Rocky Mountains are also clad with colorful displays. In the east, we can see the reds, oranges, golds, and bronzes of the mixed deciduous woodlands. In the west, we see the bright yellows of aspen stands and larches contrasting with the dark greens of the evergreen conifers. Many of the Forest Service's 100-plus scenic byways were planned with autumn color in mind. In 31 states, you can drive on over 3,000 miles of scenic byways, and almost every one of them offers a beautiful, colorful drive sometime in the autumn. So when might you see the best autumn color? Well, unfortunately, autumn color is not completely predictable, especially in the long term. It generally starts in late September in New England and moves southward, reaching the Smoky Mountains in early November. It also appears about this time in the high elevation mountains of the west. The Forest Service's fall color hotline is 1-800-354-4595 and can provide you with details as the autumn color display progresses. Do you have a question about the weather? You can address that question to question@weatherbrains.com. weatherbrains.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into the email inbox and see if anything happens to be in there.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right. Well, I'm sorry I wasn't able to join in earlier. Apparently, I had something to do, call a TV show or something back here that they drug me into. So was not able to participate as much, but I will be going back and definitely listening. So I wanted to start out with a couple emails from the newest first. This one is from Rob, and his email came in during show, and it says, this show continues to impress me. You are as relevant as any big 24/7 weather network. Although the big network has done a very good job, you couldn't have had a better guest tonight. Also agreed. So thanks, Bill Reed, for coming on. A lot of our viewers also enjoyed it. Great sight into the National Hurricane Center. And also thanks to the National Weather Service folks for working those long shifts and, of course, spending a lot of time in their offices. This next one comes in from Brian Judkins, and greetings from the UK. He's written something about the big eclipse, but first must send thoughts and prayers to those in Southeast Texas. It's been the first item on the news over across the pond. I wasn't able to come to the US for the solar eclipse, but Brian did finish with Reed Timmer's coverage for AccuWeather, although I've seen it totality 3 times. He did feel sorry for Ginger Z. Poor Ginger. She kind of missed out. It looked like a cloud was over Nashville.
Yeah, they have the same thing I do.
So, and then John Huntington sent his eclipse write-up post today and also made a comment about Texas. And he also does a lot of pictures and has a great blog post about chasing the eclipse in Nebraska with some cool images there. So thanks for sending that in, John. And Andrew S. sent in a nice write-up about how he found the show through the Alabama Weather blog, and also has a guest suggestion about new weather technology. A local station in Tampa, WFLA, recently acquired a megawatt S-band radar they call Max Defender 8 from Barron. Perhaps a show with Bob Barron and WFLA's HMIC regarding the future of weather radar and the capabilities and lessons learned of the world's most powerful radar. And Andrew can supply info to his friends at WFLA, which would be greatly appreciated. I'm sure Bill would appreciate that as well. So if you guys would like to send us some emails, guest suggestions, we would love to get those. Email at weatherbrains.com. You can send us what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, topics you would like to hear more of, and also your guest suggestions with some contact information. We'd love to get that. So go ahead and send us an email at weatherbrains.com, and we'll get our wonderful booking officer in charge of booking all of those wonderful guests, as he always does.
Thank you very much, Aubrey. It's good to have you on the show. Good to have some email here tonight. And
absolutely. And say hi to Bill. Sorry I wasn't able to jump in earlier, but definitely.
Well, here's your chance. Jump in now, Aubrey, while we got you here. Anything burning that you wanted to ask Bill that might or might not have gotten asked while you were away?
You know, I'm not sure if this was asked or not, but I remember the mayor making a comment, and I don't remember what day I was watching coverage, maybe on Saturday. But he mentioned something about the line of the forecast track and how it didn't go directly into Houston. I forget his direct quote. What are the feelings on maybe doing away with the line and keeping the cone, but just not that focused line?
Oh, I think we've muted. Bill, you may be muted. So unmute thyself in the top.
How's that? You got me now?
Yes, we got you.
Okie doke. I wonder how I got muted. Oh, well, the Max actually did away with the line on that by the howling and screaming of angry emergency managers, citizens, and other elected officials. The powers that be ordered it back on. My clever negotiating skills got it to where we could have that as an option. So it comes up when you click on it without the line. But you can turn the line on with an on-off button. What I really found out talking to people was they're going to put the line on there anyway. They'll print it out and draw the line to connect the dots. You need the points in order to make the cone. So
right.
The emergency managers are good about it. The elected officials maybe get too fixated on the line. As long as my emergency managers are savvy about what the cone really means and what the extent of the impact of the hurricane is through the use of other products, then I'm not too worried about that.
And so you also said you got 40 inches at your house.
I know I do. I have a rain gauge.
And you're not underwater. How is that? I mean, are you kind of floored by that, or?
I'm pretty much stunned over this whole event. Saturday night between 10 o'clock and 1 a.m., we got 16 and a half inches of rain. That's almost 6 inches an hour. And the water went from nothing to on my porch, which means it was 3 feet deep in the street.
So what was the highest rainfall rate you heard Saturday night, Bill?
Well, looking at the radar, the highest I saw 1 pixel of 7.5. That was north of me. During Allison, we had a couple of rain gauges that were actually in Houston that recorded very short periods of 9 inches an hour.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. So
is
Bill,
the water coming? I'm just kind of curious. Is it kind of coming up and down with some of those heavier rainfall rates?
It's very. It came up and then it came up very fast, and because the drainage system was overwhelmed, the creek went into flood right away. In fact, it went over Interstate 45, which is truly amazing because they elevated it to prevent that from happening. Well, they got to go back and do it for the 1,000-year event instead of the 500, I guess. But and that's the same problem tonight. We're really not. The rain rates we're having are an inch or so an hour. Normally, the drainage system should handle it, but 3 inches of rain had backed up halfway up my driveway again. So as long as I don't get the 3 inch an hour rates, I think I'll be okay.
Well, there really appears to be outstanding diffluence aloft over the system right now, but at least looking at the GO16 data.
Yeah, I was looking at that too. And the 2 areas the tops are getting cool is the system over the bay. That's a great place to have this thing blow up, right over the bay or just east of there in the wildlife refuge. That would be okay. Yeah. And then nearer the center down towards Freeport.
Maybe it will move on east. That would be wishful thinking. Brian Peters, do you remember where we were 12 years ago tonight?
12 years ago tonight. Yes. Commenting about the ineptitude of the officials in a certain city.
Yeah, you and I stopped in a Burger King in I think Pascagoula, or maybe it was probably Bay St. Louis, and asked some people why they were just calmly eating their Whoppers. That 6 o'clock that Sunday night, we were evacuating east to Gulf Shores, and it was amazing to us because the refrain we constantly heard was we made it through Camille.
Yeah.
And tomorrow will be the anniversary of that event, the landfall. So, Bill, what's your take on where the city of New Orleans is right now in case the next big one comes?
Wow, 5 years ago when I left the Hurricane Center, things were much better. I mean, they were still rebuilding the levee system. They totally revamped their emergency management system. I think with Ken Graham there as the MIC, they're in good. He's not a wallflower. He's not going to let them be weak on this. I think they're in so much better shape now. It's not funny. Risk wise, who knows? That is such a complicated levee system, and I'm not an engineer. I just remember an old Corps of Engineers general giving a talk once at a floodplain managers meeting, said there's 2 kinds of levees: those that have failed and those that will.
That's terrible.
Drained from my face because I never really considered that. I thought they actually made these to work, but when the chief engineer of the Corps is telling you that, you kind of wonder.
Hey, Bill, I got a question for you about the tropical storm name list. Do you think there's a possibility that Harvey could get retired?
Oh, yes.
Actually, there's a 0 probability that it won't.
Well, no, I mean, most of the time it's it's a combination of deaths and that sort of thing, and the amount of damage. But I guess with the amount of damage that you are estimating, and it may go higher than that would probably qualify it.
Yeah, well, it's actually the impacts is the number one thing that usually gets people to nominate him for. I was the chair of the committee that changed the names, and
Right.
The nations could nominate, any nation could nominate one to be retired, and you'd vote on it. So sometimes they'd nominate one that really wasn't that impactful, and we'd vote it down. But, the Cat 4 landfall, so it's a very intense storm, plus the impacts here in Houston. It's going to be one of the top 5 costliest storms on the books. It's a no-brainer. It'll be retired.
I kind of had a feeling that would be the answer, but I know you've dealt with that directly.
So what remains to be seen what the new name will be. And I was on when we retired Dean, and of course I was the chair, but I was trying to get Lixian Avila, who was the U.S. rep for international stuff, to nominate Dilbert.
I take it he wouldn't defend that position, huh?
No, I proved right then I'd be a failure as a dictator.
Well, Bill, we've kept you a long time tonight. Anything else you want to add or say before we go around the big digital mahogany table?
Yeah, I could probably talk till I fall asleep. I have nothing better to do. Donna let the dogs out just now, so they're done for a while.
Well, the boss has gone away doing something over there on the television side, so we could probably go till midnight at least.
Yeah, but now it's each event is so different. I mean, you could write a book about it. Any big event, someone who's good at writing could write a book about them. It's just, to me, that was one of the fascinating things about a career in weather. It was, you weren't a math teacher. You weren't teaching integral calculus the same thing year after year. It's just something different all the time.
So, Bill, what do you hear from Neil Frank? How's he doing?
Neil Frank is preaching the anti-global warming sermon.
Really?
That's what he does in retirement, and it just, of course, I'm on the other side, but I don't get too deep in. I stay away from most of it because it's become such a political hot button that I found that most people I play golf with are fairly right wing, and they think it's a Democrat hoax. And, well, if you already think that, then how are you ever going to generate a conversation on it?
Oh, yeah.
So I mostly just talk about it with people that have an open mind and then let it go. But Neil is doing great. He spoke at a conference I was an MC for, and he's 85 years old. He has every hair he was born with. Still has that amazing flat top haircut.
Yeah.
He looked like an astronaut, he should have been
great guy. He's always very good to talk with. He's interested in what you're up to and how things are going. And I don't think he really keeps up with the hurricane stuff all that much anymore.
Yeah. I know when we saw him, when Bill and I were down and saw you too at the 2014 National Tropical Storm Conference, I was very impressed that Neil Frank lied and said he remembered me.
He's turned us down probably 1,000 times to be on the show, Bill. So next time you get a chance to put in a good word for us, give it a shot.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised he still does the tropical weather conference down there, but that's the extent that when Bill Gray was still alive, they'd both be there, and they're very good friends. So
yeah,
I have a feeling that had something to do with it. But
yeah, I cherish the picture of me, Bill Gray, and Neil Frank. That's a
keeper.
That's a keeper.
Got a Neil Frank story, by the way.
Oh, good.
Do it.
When I was in the Navy flying hurricanes in 72 and 73, I was the point of contact or liaison between the squadron and the Hurricane Center. So I go down there in the spring for a week every year to set up all the protocols and make sure the plans were in place and all that stuff. And he was my point of contact, so I got to know him pretty well. Well, 1975 comes along, and the Navy's getting rid of meteorologists faster than they can because of the wind down of Vietnam. And I'm looking at what to do next, so I write a letter to Neil Frank, and I say, "Dear Dr. Frank, I really was impressed with the work at the Hurricane Center when I flew in the Navy. What do you recommend I do to put myself in a position to get a job down there?" And he sent me a letter with one sentence on it. It said, "Go to Florida State and get a PhD." So when they had a party for or a program for his retirement from KHOU, they were interviewing people with anecdotes about Neil. So I told that story on the recording for that, and I looked in the camera and said, "You know, Neil, I didn't, but I did."
That's great.
Good guy.
So, Bill, we've seen amazing stories of people helping people today in Houston. Just, I mean, phenomenal stories of volunteers helping perfect strangers. Have there been any stories from the other side? Any bad activities?
Yeah, there's been some looting. They actually had some places broken into and stuff taken from there. So there's been some of that. I don't think it's been widespread.
But it has seemed to be a pretty positive event from people helping people, at least.
Yeah. A lot of shelters being opened almost ad hoc. I mean, the standard number of Red Cross shelters got overwhelmed real quick. So our local high schools being opened ad hoc to be a shelter right now.
Yeah, I saw a little Twitter controversy with Joel Osteen and his big church not reaching out and doing more, according to some people.
Huh. Well,
I thought that was an interesting situation, because we saw another church. I think it was, I forget where, but the guy had an Alabama hat on. I loved it. I just yelled "Roll Tide" at the television, because he was a pastor at Cedar Creek or Clear Creek or Bayou Creek or somewhere, and they were opening up their facility even though their home had been flooded, and welcoming people in. So it was
most buildings that have bayou or creek in their name, I would think, are probably flooded right now. bad choice of naming and geography. We have a Clear Creek Community Church that sits down low. I'm sure it got flooded.
Well, I heard some lady coming into a boat, landing somewhere there where they were using like a big giant Tonka truck, to go in and get people and bring them out. And she was like, "Oh Lord, thank you for getting me out of there. There are snakes and alligators and possums." And I thought, that is not a good combination.
No.
Well, the possums feed the snake, fattens it up, and the alligator eats the snake. As long as you don't get eaten by the alligator, life goes on.
Yeah, so everybody's fat and happy. That's good.
We're getting insects from the rain came up here. All kinds of insects we're trying to get in our house.
But they're trying to dry out, huh?
They're trying to survive. The neighbors had a rabbit on their front porch.
Oh my goodness. Bill, one of the things we haven't discussed, and probably could take another half an hour to do that, is the amazingly low, at least so far, death toll.
That's actually, Allison had the 27 here in Houston, which is by far the most deaths I've had in a flood event here. Mm-hmm. I think the way that in most of the cases, the floodwaters come up slow enough that people's car stalls, they get out of the car and run for the side of the road to get up to higher ground.
Yeah.
And so the car drowns and the people don't.
Yeah. Well, I understand a family
get real deep.
Yeah, I understand a family of 6 is believed to have died in a white van Sunday afternoon.
The stories out there hadn't been confirmed when I last looked, but that's been a while.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know the date on this story. I mean, it says 8:10, updated 8:10 p.m. this evening, August the 28th. So
at least locally, we actually went out to dinner Saturday evening before the big rain started. And said at the time, maybe our last chance to take a break from the stress of this. Boy, did I know that one. But the traffic, it was a Saturday night, and the traffic was really light around here. So maybe a lot of people took heed. I mean, they were being told very bluntly, stay home.
Yeah.
None of this, if you have to drive, be careful, yada, yada. They were just being told stay home. And I think, being put that blunt, a lot of people, plus having so many recent floods where cars were, 10, 20, 50, and in Allison's case, over 100,000 cars flooded. Mm-hmm. People really don't. If they
I've been wondering, Bill, do you feel like people in the local area know that Houston was designed such that the roads have now become the spillways and the driving is particularly dangerous? I couldn't help but wonder as I saw all of the pictures on my newsfeed, and my fiance's, he lived in Houston for a long time. Everything is the roads, predominantly being flooded. Do you think that was a factor? Do people know that there?
I think because of the actual events we've had 4 big floods that have flooded the major highways, to say nothing of the minor thoroughfares, in the last 15 years. So the repetitive nature of it, and they do say that. I mean, that comes up. People do talk about our roads are designed to carry the flood waters first. So it does get put out there. Maybe not a lot, but I think it's out there for people to react to it.
Well, Bill, I guess we'll go around the big digital mahogany table here, and we've got some great picks lined up. Rick Smith, we'll start with you up there in Norman, Oklahoma. What's your pick of the week?
Well, there were so many to choose from just from Hurricane Harvey over the past several days, but I picked one that focused on the people. And the Houston Chronicle kind of dropped their paywall, as did a lot of newspapers over the past few days, to let people get coverage or see free coverage of the event. And they had an incredible photo essay today of about 250 pictures of people being rescued, people in the flood, and very powerful stuff. So that's my pick of the week.
Outstanding. Kim Cloco, have you had time to get your pick of the week ready?
Yes, sorry, I just sent it to you. Sorry for my tardiness. But my pick of the week, I have a link to the Texas Monthly, and they have a really nice conglomeration of ways you can help people during Harvey. So if you don't want to just donate to a national organization, they have it broken down by, to help kids, to help animals, to help people with medical needs, to provide food, whatever, and so on. Whatever your heart is for the people of Houston, there are a lot of really wonderful local organizations. And as everyone was talking about earlier, they really need money. So that all of these organizations are very easy to donate to, and all the links are right there.
Outstanding. Brian Peters, we're getting down to cases here. What's your pick of the week?
Yeah, but Kim, the web or your pick needs to come to me because I'm the one who puts it up there. So
all right, I'll get it to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I was, before all the Houston and Harvey and all that sort of stuff was going on, I enjoyed very much John Huntington's bit of blog post on his Eclipse 2017 chase. So I'm going to make that my pick.
Outstanding. My pick of the week is Mark Suddeth's camera view tonight from somewhere there in Houston. He was going to join us, but at the last minute, his situation became tenuous wherever he was, and he had to beg out at the last second. He was going to join us with Bill, but he's somewhere there in Houston and documenting the storm with his cameras. And so, Brian, I've shared it with you. I think I did at least.
You did.
Barker
and Cypress Road.
So he's got a camera there and some other ones too. So that's always, of course, very interesting. Next week, we're going to have Mike Gerber from NOAA talking about WEA. Great show with Craig Fugate last week. I was sorry that we got blown out of it because of the eclipse. We were traveling back and just had no cell service between Greenville, South Carolina, and Birmingham. But I think the show turned out really good, and the eclipse was off the scale. I think that 2 minutes and 11 seconds when, we got to take our glasses off made it all worthwhile. So I heard so many people saying, it was overblown, it was overhyped. But I tell you, if you're in the path of totality, it was not. So I thought that was amazing. So, Bill Reed, anything you want to share as a pick of the week?
Wow, what a long week. That kind of, I would get my mind off water for a while. I would have to say the eclipse.
Yeah, I think the eclipse was pretty awesome. It was something else. And we'd had Tony Rice on the week before. He had kind of prepared us for what to do. So, Brian, Rick, anything to share about last week? So, Kim, I guess you were on the show last week with Craig. Did Craig say anything that was kind of prescient leading up to our disaster this week?
He was Craig Fugate. He was great. He just honest and open, and it's been really fascinating to watch him on Twitter this week dealing with Harvey. So many people think he's still the FEMA administrator. He's out there and has such a strong presence, and still is seen as an authority on Twitter, and just seeing people continue to interact with him. He's still got a strong voice. But yeah, he was awesome on the show. It was a good one, I think.
That's great. Kim, anything you want to add before we adjourn?
There's only one more note I'd like everyone to be aware of. I brought up the National Flood Insurance Program, its reauthorization, and that's a cool congressional thing to be aware of. But another thing people should be aware of is the recently passed Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act has a provision in it specifically about hurricane research. And one of the things that it once emphasized is research on rapid intensification. And arguably, the science of rapid intensification is fairly young yet, and there's a lot yet to learn. Perhaps if we'd had another day, we might have been able to do more targeted things in communication or evacuation. But absolutely, this event was one of those where I think Congress has done a really good thing, and I refer people to look at that for more details.
Very good. Bill, I just had one thing before we go. You know, the NWA meeting is coming up, and NOAA and the Weather Service got our group travel approved. Yay. So I get to go, and a lot of other people get to go. Is there going to be any WeatherBrains at NWA?
Well, thank you for asking, Rick. Yeah, it's going to be a great event on Monday night. Of course, Greg Stumpf and the entire group, the Ron group, will be getting together that Monday night at the end of the icebreaker, and we'll be broadcasting live from that. So I'm glad to know that you're going to be there. Of course, Brian's got the big technical setup, and we're going to be interviewing folks that have just gone through this research operations nexus. So our friend Bruce Thomas, who is recovering from knee surgery in Kansas City last Monday, is going to be hopefully up and running around on all four wheels, and he'll bring us guests to talk to during all of that. So I think that's going to be a fascinating process. But the event is coming quickly on Monday, September the 11th. Todd Laricos and Miles Musio, along with Tricia Palmer, of course, Janice Bunting, they'll all be on to preview the event, which promises to be a huge thing. And I'm really excited about the Weather Ready Fest, which will be in its second major year at the Discovery Cube OC. So if we have any fans that are out there in Orange County, it's in Santa Ana. It'll be on Saturday morning, September the 16th. It'll go from 10 until 4. We'll have exhibitors. We'll have a great young meteorologist program stage show. Of course, Nick Walker from the Weather Channel will be there. And it's going to be a very fun event at the Discovery Cube. We're still looking. We have until Thursday for anybody who is an NWA member or National Weather Service employee who wants to volunteer. We still have some volunteer slots that are available. And Brian's going to be ordering you a beautiful shirt if you volunteer. It'll be a collector's edition, right, Brian?
Right. Absolutely.
And, of course, all the attendees will be filling out their passport with stamps from all the exhibitors. Fantastic information vetted by the National Weather Service in San Diego. Scott Martin, who is on our team here at Alabama WX, has done a fantastic job putting it together. Dr. John Scala, who is a former member and still an email card-carrying WeatherBrains email officer, has vetted that document along with Alex Tardy from San Diego. And Brian Peters will be acting as the Swami at the event. So if you have a question, you get to come and ask Brian Peters live and in person. He'll be wearing the Jiffy Pop popcorn golden hat at the event. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you for asking.
I feel a migraine coming on that day.
Yeah. You're not getting out of this, buddy. So we're gonna bake that head till that last little bit of hair falls off. So. But anyway, well, unless there's anything else to add here, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn us. WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast that's all about weather. 606 shows in the books, and every week it gets, to me, more amazing. We thank you, Bill Reed, for joining us tonight. You made the show incredible.
Yeah, Bill, thanks.
Yep, my pleasure. By the way, we now have got tornado warning out on the Bolivar Peninsula. Nasty looking little curvature on the cell there.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, that's kind of
Good
coming
luck,
up
Bill,
your way.
with everything.
Is that stuff headed your way, Bill?
Yeah, it's raining real hard now.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well, we want to hear good reports. We're sending good thoughts, lots of prayers, and positive energy your way, Bill.
Yep. Send sunshine. I forgot what it looked like.
And you're going to have to follow up with and tell us what happens, because I'm sure the WeatherBrains Nation would like to hear.
Okay. I post on Facebook periodically.
Send me or Bill something so we can put it in.
Yeah, and let us know.
Yeah.
But we'll do the show next Tuesday night when Mike Gerber will be the guest. Otherwise, we generally do the show on Monday nights. If you have a question for us, please email it to us at email@weatherbrains.com. And our email officer, Aubrey, will get it on the show at some point. And we love those guest suggestions. I especially do, since I get to follow up on most of them. If you send me a little contact information, that's even better. You get an extra brownie point over here. But till next week when Mike Gerber's our guest, I'm Bill Murray saying good luck and whatever. I need a better ending.
I think that's
Thanks,
perfectly
Bill.
fitting
Thanks,
for
Kim.
this week.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, folks.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everybody.
Bye.
Good luck, Bill, with everything.
Thank you.
Oh, we got 27 people still hanging in there. So that was great. Really appreciate Bill Reed coming on the show. Bill, longtime director of the National Hurricane Center, retired now, lives in Houston, and what a mess. And great discussion. So we will see you guys next Monday. Y'all have a great week, and God bless. Bye-bye.